Yes, guys, what is going on? Welcome back to the Adapt Performance podcast. So in today's episode, we are joined by Matt Walker. Matt Walker is a professional downhill mountain biker and a very, very good one at that. All right. So I wanted to get Matt on. Matt is currently one of my athletes. We work together. I've been working together for a year actually. So I wanted to get him on because it is such a mad sport, and I don't think it's really kind of put out there as much as it should be, how much kind of goes on behind the scenes from a performance perspective, what goes into essentially throwing yourself down a mountain at 45 miles an hour, trying to be the fastest person, you know. And in this episode, we kind of get into that. We discuss a little bit about what the actual sport is, just to give you a little bit of background information, but we also kind of go through what is going on behind the scenes, what is a little bit of a recipe for success in downhill mountain biking, what are the things you probably should have in place if you're really trying to maximize, you know, an extreme sport like this. And we spend quite a lot of time going through, you know, really good structure and teamwork and some of the performance basics that are super, super transferable to other sports. And we also kind of cover a little bit of psychology and kind of dealing with a little bit of an injury, a little bit of a setback, and how you bounce back from a performance perspective to ultimately, you know, a career high. So that's all I want to give you in terms of a teaser. All right. So let's get straight into the episode. This is me and Matt Walker. Yes, Matt, how are we doing, mate? We okay?
All good, thanks. And you?
I'm well. I've transitioned my office, mate. So when I first started the podcast, my office was upstairs in the bedroom because the missus was working from home. So she kind of shotgunned the good desk and all that. Yeah. But this one's like a sauna. So it's just like nice. Sunbeam and everything. So you're going to start seeing some beads of sweat dripping down. I'm already looking shiny.
Nice. Fair one.
It's not good. It is. What have you been doing today, mate? What have you been up to?
Easy day today, mate. Got my hair cut, especially for the podcast, can you see? Sweet trim up.
Yeah, that's shapely.
Yeah, not a lot else really. I've been put on looking after dog duty today. So pretty easy day, to be fair. Yeah, I've done quite a lot of riding the last few days. And then gym and stuff as well. So just, an easy day. I'm riding the next couple of days as well. So take the opportunity.
Soaking it up.
Yeah.
Love that, mate. Love that. Sweet. So what I want to do just to begin with, mate, can you kind of kick us off with a little bit of who you are, what you do, and why you're here, basically?
Yeah, well, I'm Matt Walker. I'm 23 years old. I'm from just outside Oswestry in Shropshire, and I race downhill mountain bikes for a job, and you train me.
There we go. I love it.
I've been racing mountain bikes for as long as I can remember. I think I first started racing when I was 13. And it's basically, I've just been on this journey of kind of development since then, I guess. Like anyone in all different sports, you kind of just, I had a passion for riding to start with. And then started competing after a couple of years. And then just steadily moved my way up the ranks year after year. I started at like regional level, then on to national level. And then I was lucky enough to get spotted at one of the national races by my actually current team manager. And then kind of graduated to the factory team in 2016. I had 2 years at Junior World Cups, and honestly, never really looked back. I've been racing World Cups now, as I say, since 2016, as a professional since 2018, and absolutely love it. Wouldn't change it for the world. Living the dream, mate.
When did you realise then? So you started riding when you were young. When did you realise, like, shit, I'm good. I'm good at this. When was like that point when you was like, I can do this?
I think, like, me and my mates would always ride. Like outside of competition, like when we were much younger, we'd always ride, and I could see that I had like a general knack for it, should you say? Mm-hmm. And I was always like really, I could tell that I was quite competitive, and bikes was like the first thing that I really felt like I wanted to do well in. I felt like I played football and stuff in school and rugby. Never really felt like I was okay, but never had like a desire to be the best at it. But when I started competing in bikes, I felt much differently about it. There was much, I think, because there's just more passion involved. I just loved it so much, and because of like the competitive side, that started to come out in me, and I wanted to be the best at it really. And I first started noticing that I was good only really when I once I'd done like a year or so of racing, I guess.
Okay.
Because I never, when I started racing, I was never the best guy there. I think the first race, I was at a regional race and I finished towards the back. The second race, I made a big step, but still kind of in the mid-pack somewhere. And then I just had this like, I guess not an addiction, but I just really liked the progression of it, and I like going back every weekend to a different race and kind of challenging myself. And at that point, obviously the pool of kids racing is quite small, so you kind of get to know everyone. So it's very easy to see your progression, if you see what I mean, because you're racing the same kids every week. So that's how it started, and then I guess it's hard to pinpoint a time where I thought, I could actually do this as a job. But I could understand that I was good when probably in 2013, I won national champs, which is in cycling. It's a little bit different to other sports in that you have a series over the summer. So you have like a national series, but then also we have a national championships, which is like a one-off race, one venue on one day in the year. And that's when you would see riders in a white jersey with the British stripes across the chest or the midriff there. And it's the same at world level as well. Like you'll have a world series throughout the year, and then you have world championships, which is, some people might recognize the rainbow jersey, which is like I guess the most prestigious jersey in cycling really, or at least off-road sport. That's like the white jersey with obviously the rainbow stripes. So yeah, I think when I won that when I was 2013, in 2013, that's probably when I first realised, I'm quite good. But it wasn't until probably a couple of years later where I actually thought I could progress this further and do it for a living, kind of thing.
Sick. Sounds good, mate. So I think most people probably know what a mountain bike is, but the actual sport of downhill mountain biking then gives a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of essentially how it works and like what it actually is at the professional level. Like, what do you have to do, and how does the year look, and all those types of things.
Yeah. So in terms of how the year looks, we race very simply. It's like the F1, or I see it as the F1 of mountain biking. So the downhill season runs from March, April to the end of September usually. There's usually 8 or 9 World Cup rounds, mostly in Europe, as it has been for the last few years, mostly in Europe, but then usually we have 2 flyaways, one in Canada, one in North America somewhere. The sport itself is basically, if you've ever seen anything like downhill skiing, it's pretty similar to that, but on bikes in the summer. The tracks vary quite a lot. Ultimately, the aim of the game is to race from the top of the hill to the bottom of the hill the fastest. The course is laid out between tapes, so you have to stay obviously between the tapes, but it's not obvious a lot of the time where the best line is. So a lot of the job is trying to find the best line through a section. It may be rock garden, or a section that's really steep, or with roots, or holes, or it might be off camber sections. So there's a lot to it, and it's all about piecing those sections together to make the fastest way down the hill, basically. We all race individually, so you're basically essentially racing against the clock. Although there's in a men's final, there's 60 riders, everyone races individually. So the race usually lasts about from the first rider to the last rider is usually about 3 hours. And you qualify on the Saturday, let's say, and the fastest qualifier starts last on the Sunday. So generally, as you're watching, the riders get faster and faster and faster, and the kind of atmosphere in the finish builds and builds and builds. So the fastest rider finishes at the end of Sunday afternoon. So that's generally how it works. Obviously, it can be there's a lot of things that go into that. The tracks some are super super fast and wide open. Some are more slower, more technical, steeper. There's obviously such a variation in terrain where you go all around the world different.
What kind of speeds are we? What kind of speeds are we talking when we're lobbing ourselves down a mountain?
Usually about 40 mile an hour. Anything between like 30 mile an hour. Yeah, usually.
Yeah, just that sound.
And then I think
roughly
top speeds, you maybe touch like, I don't know, 45, maybe 50 mile an hour in some places.
It's mad. It's mad.
Yeah.
How long from top to bottom? I know this is probably going to differ between different races and stuff, but roughly how long are you kind of in that descent for?
Usually you try and train as though it's 4 to 5 minutes, I would say.
Okay.
More often than not, it's shorter than that. It could be, I think we've had races this year where it's been just over 3 minutes. But then also you have races which are like 4.5, getting on to 4:40. So there's a lot of variety. And some tracks are more physical than others.
Okay. So I guess just kind of getting a little bit more information around that mountain bike piece then. So the top 60, I'll tell you what, when we start thinking about a 4 to 5 minute race on average, what's the difference between like a win and a top 10? Like what kind of time frame are we looking at?
Totally depends on the track. Usually these days, it's got the last few years, the level, like everything, I guess, gets higher and higher, and the competitions gets tighter and tighter. And some races this year, I think if you're, I don't know, I want to say 2 seconds back, you're outside the top 10. But then some
it's mad.
Some longer tracks, say that are really rough, you might be 5, 6, 7 seconds maybe outside the top 10. It totally depends. You know, some races you go to, everyone's really, really close. And then sometimes you go to races and 1 or 2 people have like amazing performances and they will kind of gap the rest of the field by 3, 4 seconds. So it totally depends. But I'd say on average, like if you're 5 seconds off the winner, you're not going to be in the top 10.
Got you. Okay. So I guess just a final kind of follow-up question on that before we get into some performance bits. So thinking about like downhill mountain biking then, it's obviously going to be a really physical sport in terms of what you're having to do. You know, you're having to kind of fight against the track and ride through. Yeah. What would you say is like one, or give me a few kind of physical qualities which you find are super important for you to be able to do your job and do it well in terms of racing?
I think our sport in particular is really, you have to be quite a, I want to say varied athlete. Like you have to be able to do quite a lot of things. You have to be really strong for one, but not just brutally strong and heavy, because that doesn't help. You've got to be really strong, but your power to weight has got to be good, because ultimately you've got to carry yourself well. And especially when you start to get tired, you need to, be able to sustain that. But if you look at like the data for heart rate data for a downhill run, it's at, I don't know, let's say 120 when you set off, but it will go basically to your max heart rate and stay there for 4 minutes. So you've got to be able to withstand that. And also, you do that 12 times in a weekend, 12, 13 times in a weekend. So you've got to be fit to be able to deal with that. Also, the race is only one race, so it's only one run, so it's really intense. So mentally, it can be very tiring because you've got lines change, conditions change, tyres you have to change, suspension setup you have to change. Like there's so much that we've not even spoke about in terms of how much you have to put into the bike and setting up the bike to make sure that that's doing its job for you and working with you. There's so many elements to it that it takes a toll on you mentally. So you have to be mentally strong to be able to deal with that and then perform on on one single run. You haven't got 30 minutes to kind of get into the race and adapt to whatever's happening in front of you. It's just all in and everything you've got for that one run. So yeah, I mean, you have to be fit. You have to have a very good level of base fitness to deal with not only the race weekend, but then race weekend on race weekend on race weekend throughout the season. You have to be strong, not only just to be able to stay upright and absorb the big holes and, you know, steep sections where you're kind of pressing your weight off the handlebars. Yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of the time there's some pedaling sections, so you need to be strong on the pedals. There's a lot that
how important would you say like the pedaling sections are to an overall performance? Do you think it can be won or lost in that section alone, or is that like, is it more about your lines and that's probably where the biggest chunk of the pie is?
Yeah, I think the biggest chunk is nowadays is bike setup, line choice, and like commitment, like where you're mentally, where you're at. I think the level is so high now. I guess it's the same across a lot of sports. Mental side is by far the biggest thing. But especially with us, because you have to be so committed now and the times are so close. You know, like, for example, this season, I can name numerous times where you're in the start gate and you know you've got to go not only as fast as you can, but you also have to take risks. You almost have to allow yourself to be in a place, you have to be comfortable enough that you're going to go into a section faster than you have before, not 100% sure if it's doable kind of thing. You have a good feeling on the bike, obviously, but you need to like push the envelope to have a good result these days. You really need to like risk, and it's being comfortable with that. And obviously with that comes the risk of injuries and stuff with crashes, but that's another thing.
I guess with that then, where do you feel like that that risk gets solidified a little bit? Like, what makes the difference between you committing more than somebody else? Is it just that you've had better qualifying runs? Is it your personality in general where you're just like, fuck it, let's have it? Or is it just confidence on the bike? Like, where does that come from?
It's just confidence on the bike. I think people get their confidence from different places. Me personally, I get quite a lot of confidence from my training. Not only train on the bike, but off the bike as well. I like to feel fit and ready. That gives me a lot of confidence. Also in bike setup, just knowing that I've kind of looked under every stone in terms of bike setup and really like gone to extremes as well with bike setup and maybe tried stuff in the winter that I kind of knew wouldn't work, but I've looked at it anyway just to make sure. And just been really, really thorough with everything and just made sure that, like I said, you've tested all the different tyres and you've tried different suspension setups on the bike, and you're fitter than you were before, you're stronger than you were before, you've done more downhill riding than you have before. Those kind of things give you confidence. But then also once you're into the season and you get, you know, you have one good result, you often see it especially in downhill racing, you see across a season, you do see riders have great starts. They'll have some really good results, then they'll have a crash and the results dip, and then they kind of build the confidence again and kind of come back towards the end. And I've experienced it myself where I've been super confident, riding really, really well. I've been on the podium, next race had a crash, and my season has really suffered from then. Like pre and post crash, my fitness, okay, it's maybe slightly different, but like small percentages once the time I've like recovered and everything. But it's the mindset. Your mindset isn't the same. Your confidence takes a knock, and then you can't perform at the level anymore. And that is like that is the biggest thing for consistency, is being able to get yourself in a good place, know how to get yourself in a good place, and then do things along the way to keep yourself there. And that is really, really difficult.
So I guess just going back to that then. So obviously you had a belter of a season with Leogang. It was Leogang, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So historically, you've kind of said how that was a really rough track for you. Haven't had, the best results. So how was you able to kind of turn that round then? How was that turn from something you was a bit like, got to do this track, to boom, right, we're in a really good spot?
I think,
was it literally the preparation, do you think, or?
Yeah, the preparation. I think I had a really bad. It goes back like almost 12 months from that point, because. So I won the overall in 2020, and went into 2021. The first round of the season was at Leogang, and previously, as I said, like I've never had that great results at Leogang. They've been okay, but not my best. And I came in with a number one plate as well, because I'd won the series the previous year, and just had a bit of a disaster weekend. I felt good on the bike. I started the weekend strong and I was fast, but by the time I raced, the conditions changed a little bit, and I finished 23rd, 4th, something like that. Like quite a long way back from where I expected to be. So that was a bit of a sobering moment, shall we say? It's like, oh, well, the whole number one thing's gone already. We're outside the top 20 and we need to build from here again. But I remember we stayed in Leogang after the race and just tried to figure it out. Did some more riding on the track, and actually left there pretty happy. With how, not with how the race went, but how the week post actually went, and I got a good feeling, and my season kind of started to come back towards the end of the year. So going in this year, I knew that that work had been done, and I felt more confident anyway. The race weekend was really difficult. It was really, really wet, and then on the Saturday when we raced, it was sunny all day. Nearly 30 degrees. So I knew the track was going to change completely, and all weekend I'd kind of put in the back of my head, just remember that it could be much drier than this on Saturday, so just kind of get through. And I had a great qualifying run on the Friday. I managed to be third, which was far more than I expected. And straight away, it's a bit of confidence there. I didn't feel like that was going to be the best run, but I'm here and I'm in the mix, and I was close. And then all of a sudden, it's I could win this now. And you start to then build the puzzle towards getting that final race run. I remember going and walking the track and just having another look at lines, and just always keeping in my head how it could be dry and how lines can change and stuff. And also tyre choice. I remember we got to the final and a lot of people stayed on wet tyres. And I remember saying to the guys in the team, I need to know, even 30 minutes before I drop, come out at the start, I need to know if I need wet or dry tyres. Because it's my call to make, totally. But so I put people in place to walk down the track all the way, obviously because I haven't got time to walk down the whole track. So Harry, one of the guys on the team, he walked down the whole track off, rear next to the side, even after the men's race has started, because obviously, as I said, it's a 3-hour thing. So, and he was taking pictures pretty much every corner, and I was on the warm-up bike at the top of the hill, just looking at these pictures, still not decided whether it was wet or dry tyres. And the bottom section of the track was really muddy, in the trees, big ruts, really, really technical piece of track. And that was obviously going to dry the slowest because it was in the trees. And he got to the trees, and I remember seeing some pictures that he'd sent me, and I was like, I've got to be strong with my decision, not turn back on it, make the call and just commit. I knew I was in a great place. I had the speed because I qualified third. So at this point, I just remember thinking basically just go all in. So I went dry tyres.
Yeah.
I never raced. I've raced on the tyre, God knows how many times, but not that weekend. Left the bike alone, just didn't even touch a click, just put dry tyres in it and went and just committed to the job. And that bottom section was where I managed to pull a bit of time back, and I won the race by 0.3 of a second. So, amazing day. A lot of things that went into it, from a mental side and from, like an S&C and coaching.
Mate, I can remember watching it, So I was in Stockport. I had like a get together with some of the guys that I train rugby and American football and stuff, and we had like a little bit of lunch. So I had it on, so I was watching the top 10. Yeah, mate, I've never felt so sick. I swear to God, just from watching my phone, I was like, because obviously it's such a, for anybody that's watched it on your phone or actually seen it in person, it is mad. Like, it's brutal. You see some crashes, you see some awful things, but mate, when he came down, I was like, somebody's cutting onions in here. I was bloody tearing also. It's mad. It was sick, mate. I can remember driving home. I didn't stop smiling for the full 2 hours. I was chuffed.
Yeah.
But going into that then, she kind of hinted at this, but if you had to, write a recipe for success in downhill mountain biking, if you had to kind of pull together all the different pieces that goes into somebody being like a really successful athlete, what you put in, like what are those things that really kind of give you a lot of value and actually make your job easier and make it possible?
I think you need to be very skilled. You have to have a lot of bike skill, generally.
Does that come from bike time, or is a little bit of that just pure talent?
Yeah. I mean, talent takes you so far, doesn't it? But at world level, everyone pretty much has the same talent. Other people work harder than others, and that's what makes the difference. So you need to have the talent to get there in the first place. Then you need to work hard with what you've got to be fit and strong enough. I think over the last couple of years, I've realised how much of the mental side really, really matters, and how much that really makes a difference. In one or two races, yes, but certainly over a season, to be more consistent, it makes a big difference to me. I think you just need to be a very well-rounded athlete as well to get the most out of it. And I think that goes across all sports. Like, you need to have good communication with physios, coaches, suspension people, your mechanic, your team manager. You need to have good communication with all those people and have like a really strong support network where everyone knows what's going on. So I think that's really important. But then, it's just doing the basics really, really well, I think.
Yeah. I think I just want to back that up as well. I think I've said this to you before. I can remember we were chatting over a Nando's, over a full chicken and a Fino Pitta, that I just consider you like a really professional athlete in the sense of how you do all those things really, really well. Like the communication's on point, but you said it before, you're looking under every stone. Like, you're not just kind of dropping the ball left, right, and center and just trying to wing it. And I must admit, when I first started working in mountain biking, it wasn't my first sport that I'd worked in. I was pretty new to it, and I'm thinking the culture of it, I'm unsure how people are going to be. Is it going to be like this, like the typical skateboarding stereotype athlete that's just a little bit, lax? I wasn't sure if it was going to be like that. Are there people at the top that you feel are like that, or is everybody kind of similar to you, do you think?
I think more and more, like, people are, it's definitely getting more professional. Like, if you go back 10, 15 years, I think it was a totally different sport, to be honest. I mean, obviously I wasn't there myself, so I can't comment exactly, but just looking how the sport's evolved, just from looking at old videos and stuff that you would have seen of the sport at the time, even at World Cup level, like, there was loads more partying going on, and it was kind of, it seemed a lot less serious. Obviously the racing on Sunday is always serious, but like everything around that seemed, just more, just not as professional. Not as professional, yeah. And it's totally becoming more like the top athletes or the top riders in the sport are top athletes, and it's becoming that they have such a clear advantage, just through putting the work in and being stronger, fitter, more dedicated than everyone else, that you can't just compete by riding your bike a bit and being a talented bike rider. It's not enough anymore, which I think it's changed slowly over a period of time, but there's certainly been people that have kind of come into the sport with that kind of mindset and changed it. I remember as I was growing up, like Aaron Gwynn, he came to the sport and dominated for a lot of years, and you could just see how strong he was on the bike and obviously how fit he was. And it just made such a difference. And it's, it's kind of caught up now. And I think it would be very interesting to see how many people like 10 years ago had all the kind of, all the different like areas of preparation that people have now.
I think that'd be cool, mate. Like
as much as we are now. I don't think so. I think the sport's evolving and it will continue to evolve. And even the technology in the bikes is like ridiculous now compared to what it was 10 years ago. So let's see what it's like in another 10 years.
So that's a good point as well. So going around, if we think about Formula One, Formula Two, all those things, and how, to an extent, more money will buy you a better car. How much does, you mentioned bike setup before. Is this just kind of everybody's got the same tools and you do with them what you've got? Or is there a financial backing thing which just kind of gives certain riders a little bit of an edge? What's the situation there?
No, there isn't. There honestly isn't. I wouldn't say, like, money doesn't get you very far at all. As long as you've got enough to buy a decent bike, which, don't get me wrong, it's got a lot of money.
Yeah.
But you can go. What I'm saying is, you can go out as average Joe, can go and buy every single part that's on my World Cup winning bike. Like the suspension, the wheels, the tyres, the frame, even all the components, handlebars, grips, brakes. There's nothing on our bikes that are prototype or just for World Cup racers, or there's nothing on it that money can't buy, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And across the World Cup paddock, there's nothing, half the teams are on. The industry's small, right? So half the teams, say on a suspension point, half the teams are on Fox suspension, pretty much half the teams are on RockShox suspension. All those riders across all the teams have the same stuff. So it's not like if you're putting more money in, you get better stuff. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Same with wheels. It's like everyone will pretty much run a similar wheel set. Okay, they're different brands, but
there's no secret weapon.
The performance is very, very similar across tyres, wheels, suspension, frames, everything. It's just at that level, small. It's just small percentages that make a difference. There's no one out there that's he's got on a Saracen. That's why he's winning. It doesn't work like that in mountain biking, which is great. I think.
No. I think it's a good thing. I think, it just instills the we said before, but the basics really do work. You go out, you practice hard, you take care of the 1%, and, those things add up over time. So just want to shift gears towards actual training then. So how does your training kind of look on a week by week, month by month basis? How have you kind of got those things set up? Because I'm sure people will be curious what actually goes into a performance.
So across across a month period, it's easier to say over a week really, because I'll generally do the same things every week for a month period, let's say, and then maybe change it up. So I'll maybe in like this. Also, it changes as well as you get closer to the season, which is probably the same across a lot of sports. As you'd like dial in towards the season, your training changed a little bit. But to start with, it's quite. I mean, we're in the UK, so the weather's not great. So getting out on your bike all the time kind of makes you susceptible to being ill. So that first block of training is usually a lot of it's done indoors, just to keep you out of the shit mainly. So you do a lot of gym stuff, like gym 3 times a week, let's say, and then you'll do maybe a road ride, a trail bike ride, running. I've done like maybe 1 or 2 runs a week, some sprint sessions as well, and it all just totally depends on the time of year, how I'm like building into the season. Obviously, the gym stuff changes totally, I would say. The fundamental stuff is always there, but as we dial into the season, there's a lot of different stuff that goes into it, which maybe you could talk about. But yeah, it's just a lot of hours on the bike getting fit, but then, you know, as you get closer to the season, you're out on the downhill bike a lot more. So it turns from kind of gym and road bike and gym and trail bike to more gym and downhill bike as you get closer to the season. And naturally, like, you get to January, February, and maybe some of our sponsors have new products that they want us to try, or they've developed could be a new wheel set, a new suspension, or new brakes, or even a brake pad or something, you know, new tires that they want us to test for the season. So generally, as you start to get closer to the season, start to come towards your pre-season races, then you spend a lot more time on the bike. And I think that's quite a nice point, actually, is that it's so important to ride the bike. I think a couple of years ago, I was racing really well in the summer, and I kind of almost thought like, I'll just do loads of fitness training, get fitter, get stronger, and when I get on the bike again, I'll be better. And it didn't really work like that. I feel like going into into the 2021 season, I'd won the overall the year before, and thought, I know how to ride the bike. That's no problem. I'll get fitter and stronger than I ever have been before. I'll come back, and that'll be the extra 5% that I need to be at the top every weekend. I've done it before. I can do it again, kind of thing. And it was a bit of a shock when I did get back on the bike. And obviously there was other things that made it more difficult. Like, we were right in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, and it was difficult to travel and train properly on like European tracks, which are generally like just a bit longer and rougher than what you'd get in the UK. And also the temperature. Like, you train in the UK and it's 5 degrees, and then when you race in Europe and it's 30 degrees, the bike works totally differently. Like, the rubber feels totally different. The oil in all the suspension works differently. So it's really important to test in those conditions. And as I've got more towards the top of the sport, I've realised that making sure that pre-season I get myself away and train in conditions I'm going to race in, not just ride in the UK where it's snowing and pissing it down all the time. And it's those little things that I think make a difference. And over the last couple of years, I've really tried to get away as much as possible, ride the downhill bike much more than I have previously. Always trying to like adapt my skill set and try and become a better bike rider, as well as just fitter and stronger. Because, like we said before, you have to be a very rounded athlete, and it doesn't matter how fit and strong you are if you can't ride the bike. Like one of my good friends said to me, like, it doesn't matter how many watts you can put out if you're braking in the middle of a corner, because it doesn't make any sense.
You counteracted it straight away.
Being the fittest, strongest guy if fundamentally you can't ride the bike properly. So it's
you got to keep off the brakes at the right time.
Yeah, and just ride it properly. So that is really important, and it's just
so with that. Can you? So essentially, what you're saying there is, if you want to get better at bike riding, you need to ride the bike, which is one of those. There's an element of specificity there. Can you overdo it? Can you do too much downhill? Then why do you not ride the bike 7 times a week instead of your trip? Talk to us about that.
No, you definitely can, and I think what is like you'll train and you'll ride, but you'll never ride at race pace. Like as much as you say, I'm going to do time runs and I'm gonna like do race simulation and I'm gonna do this and do that. When it's on your local hill at home and the track is 1:30, and no one's there to watch you, and it doesn't really matter, and then all of a sudden you're at World Champs and there's 40,000 people watching you, and it's a totally different thing altogether. I tell you that. So it doesn't matter how much people say, "Oh, I train at race pace." It's not the same intensity at all. But trying to do that often just heightens the risk of everything. Like you're going so fast these days, and you have to, as I say, you have to risk to be competitive at the highest level. If you're doing that week in, week out, you're asking for injury, and that you need to do enough that you feel comfortable and everything's perfect with the bike, or as good as can be, but not overdo it in that you're, I guess, heightening your risks of injury and stuff like that. And I think riding enough so your skills are there and like up to scratch, but then you got to find time in the week to build a good level of base fitness and stuff. Because as I said, there's no good in being a great bike rider if you're knackered when you get to Saturday afternoon, because you'll never perform at your highest then either. So it's just it's like juggling. You're juggling everything, and it's just about finding the right ratio of bike ride into gym work to, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and you've got to, but then also have fun with it and have some chill out time, and it's so many different things you've got to just kind of juggle to get yourself in a good place. But when you're there, it's plain sailing. It's great.
There's so many similarities in what you were just saying there, like, of not going balls to the wall every single session, or you can't ride the bike too much because then you've just committed too much risk, and eventually you are going to catch some bad luck and things are going to go wrong. There's a lot of sports that are like that as well. If we think like boxing and MMA, you don't spar 100% every session because it doesn't work. You need to pick and choose your times. Same with rugby. You don't do full contact all the time. You save it for the actual competition time mostly. You'll do close work, but then it's just about balancing those things. Yeah. What I think super important with this as well, and I think it's kind of been in the background throughout all this, is somebody kind of arranging those things. So we're obviously linked together through Dixie, through Phil. Yeah. And I think that's just such a powerful thing. If he listens to this, he'll grin at me. He'll see me. He'll be like, "Yeah, you like me, don't you?" I know he'll be buzzing. But it's such having somebody there that, one, you can speak to and be really open about, look, Dixie, I need to ride my bike more. Because we've had that situation last year. I can remember having some gym sessions booked in. And then you would have had a conversation with Dixie and been like, "You know what? I don't feel good on the bike at the minute. I need to go ride my bike." And he was like, "Yeah, let's fuck it. Let's pull the handbrake a little bit on the S&C work. Get out on your bike, go to a camp." And that's so important, to have plans, but almost write them in pencil, and don't be afraid of kind of getting rid of them sometimes, and trusting your athlete.
Yeah. I think it's like, personally, I have such a, like, I'm in a very fortunate situation that I have, like, Dixie is absolutely fantastic, and calling him like a coach isn't really like enough, really. I don't feel like it really sells what he actually does for his athletes. I feel like he's a performance manager, and he puts a program together for the athlete to perform at their highest. And that's not just telling them what to lift in the gym, because he could do that and it would probably be fine. But he gets you in because you're an expert in that field, and he knows you'll do a better job. So that's why you're there. And there's Sarah, who I speak to as a sports psychologist. She's there because she's an expert in that field. And then, he has contacts with physios and all the rest of it. So it's just putting everyone together. And like we said at the start, just having great communication with everyone. Everyone knows what I'm up to, where I'm at with my training, where I'm at with my riding, and just having good communication across all all members of staff, should we say, is kind of the backbone of my preparation for the season, really.
Yeah, and I think it's solid, mate. I think that's kind of what it needs to be, and I think that is the thing that is making the difference for you at the minute, and I think it shows. I think that's why the rehab from the current injury is going really well as well. I think you're in a really good spot at the moment. But yeah, I think just kind of echoing that point, having somebody there that kind of, one, can challenge you in certain areas, but also kind of pull you back in certain areas at times as well, is just super important, just to have that back and forth, because there will always be blind spots you'll have as an athlete, and same as a coach, and I'm sure Phil will have blind spots sometimes that occasionally we need to push back on, and that's what a team is, though, isn't it? That's the importance of it.
Yeah, definitely. 100%, yeah. And it just makes my job a lot easier in a lot of ways, because I don't have to figure stuff out on my own. I just voice my opinion to the group, and I have expert opinions coming back to me, and it takes a lot of pressure off, I think.
Yeah. I suppose then you just need to focus on doing the thing. You don't need to worry about the research or second guessing it. It's like, well, okay, I'll trust Jord. What are we doing today? This is what I want. Boom, it's done. And you can just focus on getting shit done.
Yeah.
So one final thing I kind of want to touch on is, we've been speaking through the psychology bit quite a bit, and how the mental side and committing to risk. How often are you seeing Sarah, the psychologist? What are some of the things that you found have been super important in terms of your preparation as an athlete around the psychology side?
Well, I started seeing her a couple of years ago now, kind of in, it was in 2020. At the end of 2020, I think I started talking to her. Oh no, maybe even earlier than that. I can't remember, but I've been speaking to her for a good few years. Crash? Yeah, I think it was the end. Maybe it was as early as the end of 2019, even. It may have been, but basically, I started speaking to Sarah because I kind of felt like this was also through Dixie. We kind of felt like mutually it would be a good decision to just have a chat with Sarah, the sports psychologist, and just find out where I was at, because I was in a position with my racing where I felt it was the first time in my career, even from being really small in racing, where I felt like I was riding well, and I'd come across the line, turn around, and the time wouldn't be great. Usually, if you have a good run, if I felt like I had a good run, the position I would be happy with, whether that was 10th, 20th, whatever I felt realistically I could be. If I felt like I had a good run, I would usually achieve that goal. And I was getting to a point where I was riding, I felt like I wasn't quite riding myself, and I'd get to the bottom of the hill and I just wouldn't really understand where I've gone wrong. I was so far off, and I was just in a bit of a tricky situation with it, really. I just needed some guidance, and we spoke to Sarah, and basically it all kind of stemmed from a crash I had in Fort William, which I was riding super well, overconfidently, to be honest. I was taking a lot of risks way too often, and I was actually riding in practice, and I was just going too fast, basically, and I made a bit of an error, ended up coming off and landed on a big root on my left side here, and it winded me that much that I remember crawling around on the floor trying to get my breath back and then passing out, and honestly it felt like someone was strangling me, because I just couldn't get the air in. Next day I wake up and I'm on my back still in the woods. So anyway, a pretty traumatic experience, shall we say. And from then I just lost so much confidence. I didn't want to be in that situation again. My mind was playing tricks on me. I felt like every time I set off down the hill that could happen, and I was thinking about that. And every rock, every route, I was just looking at it, seeing it as a threat. And I stopped enjoying going through the process of having that challenge because race weekends are challenging. at the best of times, you're always kind of pushing and looking for that next bit. And I kind of not lost the fire, but I was just struggling with it. I started to not enjoy going through the challenge and just seeing it as like a threatening thing. And I didn't really want to push my limits, and ultimately that ended with me not really enjoying my racing, feeling like I couldn't do any better, like I couldn't push through this mental barrier that I was in, and just getting shit results, and then feeling deflated from the race weekend, and go to the next week trying to turn it round, not being able to, getting in my own head again, having another shit result, and just like it just getting worse. So we started speaking to Sarah, and like she never said anything revolutionary. It's not like you go to these sessions and it's like, oh, here's what you're missing out on. This is the magic.
Here's that motivational quote you didn't know.
Here's this motivational. Here's this remedy you need to tell yourself every, and then you'll be fine. It's not. It wasn't really like that. She just really helped me understand why I felt like that, and it just helped me learn myself and learn my body and learn my mind and learn why, if you are feeling threatened in a certain, by a certain section on the track or knowing that why your brain tells you certain things, if you know what I mean, like once you've had an injury, your brain just needs time to forget it almost. And it just helped me understand that, and then you can always assess where you are, if you know what I mean, and how you're feeling, and then how to deal with it.
Was there much of like a visualization piece with some of the work you've done with Sarah? Has that ever been part of it, or is that not really?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, especially through the COVID stuff, and the race season was like we raced really late in the year, and the calendar got changed around a little bit. And obviously not been able to ride the down bike quite as much. We did quite a lot of visualization stuff, and I carry that into all my training now moving forward. Just with the use of GoPros is really good, because you can kind of watch the track back and kind of learn it, or learn where it goes left and right at least. And it's so strange. Like I've done like some visualization stuff where, I mean, pretty much anyone could do it, I guess. As if like you try and just like close your eyes and think about a particular day where you were, I don't know, like I could take myself to the top of like Val de Sol race or something, and like if you think about it enough, you can hear like the crowd, or what, the turbo trainers, and like, and maybe the heat from the sun and all these kind of things. You know what I mean? You can really visualize it to a point where you start to feel nervous. And it's like your body like almost gets used to that feeling. So when you are in that position, it's not so stressful. And yeah, it is really important. And I think training your mind or being able to get yourself in a mentally good place before racing is becoming more and more important. And I've realised over the last couple of years how important it is for me. So
it's interesting to say that.
It's like, it's the same as everything else. Like I've said, there's no point in being really fit if you can't ride the bike.
Link it together.
No point in being fit or ride the bike if you can't commit to the job when you need to.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said there around like, you can start to get the nerves, and you just put yourself in a situation where you are going to adapt to it. You're just kind of putting yourself in that situation. You get better, you deal with those feelings a little bit more. And, so essentially you're trying to think of not the worst case scenario, but a scenario you will be in, so that, you kind of dampen that effect later on. And I can remember reading about visualization it would have been a few months ago, but the same type of thing is when you're kind of feeling really kind of shit about something. They were saying, well, close your eyes and just have something in your mind of the last time you felt like really proud, or really confident when something went super well. And like, when I tried it, I was like, my chest starts puffing out a little bit. You start having a little bit of a grin. You're like, I could take on the world here. But it's mad, mate. The brain, it's nuts.
It controls the body,
control center of everything.
Not believe. It honestly does.
Yeah. Insane.
Quite scary, actually.
100%, and I think, kind of going back to that crash, what you said, your brain, that your body's fine, you're probably healed up and everything, but the brain is still kind of shutting you down a little bit and stopping you from being able to operate as normal. And
yeah,
it's huge. Cool, mate. I want to wrap that up. I just want to thank you for that. That was absolutely sick. I know there's going to be loads of value in that for people, whether they're interested in mountain biking or not. I think it's just going to be useful for people to hear some of the similarities between different sports and actually what it takes to be at the top of the game. Thank you a lot for that, mate.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime, mate.